Praise be to Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon His Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and those who follow his footsteps till the last day. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to render us the true knowledge and save us from the evil deeds and all astrayness. Allahumma. Last time the fault was my side. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده ثم ما بعد فإن خير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us, increase us in knowledge and faith. Last time we stood at naskh, and again we say the abrogation, which is a naskh, and we gave the definition of a naskh, and we stopped at which page? Which
page 158, sir. Page 158.
158. Okay, just wait. Let me start. Okay, abrogation. 1558, huh?
Yes.
156, we finished. And we gave, some examples of abrogations, and we said it might happen that the ayah or the hukum is abrogated and the ayah is still being recited, or the vice versa. We gave example with what Umar radiallahu anhu was afraid of, that the people will forget about stoning the adulterer and the adulteress to death if zina is proven, okay, and claiming that it is not in the book of Allah. And he mentioned that it was an ayah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogated its recitation, but the hukum is still valid. And we said also one of the examples is the abrogation of both the text as well as the law, like in number 3 here. Okay, in number 3, excuse me. In number 3, he said abrogation of both the text. The text. What's this? As well as the law. For example, he gave an example with the saying of Aisha radiallahu anha that it was revealed in the Quran, the complete sucklings would prevent is 10 complete sucklings would prevent one from marrying through foster relationship or الرضاعة. But then it was abrogated to be 5. And the ayah was abrogated, both recitation and both in its hukm. We gave also example abrogation without substitute. Okay, you can read this, Sheikh Abdul Majid.
Abrogation without a substitute. The opinion of the majority of scholars is that is that it is permissible for an abrogation to occur without a substitute for the abrogated law. Their proof is the abrogation of giving charity compulsory to the Prophet ﷺ when having a
yes.
When having a conference with him without a substitute, as in Surah Al-Mujadala. Abrogation with a substitute.
Yeah, let's talk about this first. And here, the opinion of the majority of scholars, okay, is that it is permissible for an abrogation to occur without a substitute, without an alternative to that law, okay? So here, example, is the example here is the, what was mentioned here is the story of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, if someone wants to counsel the Prophet ﷺ or to talk privately, okay, with the Prophet ﷺ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, you know, mentioned in the Quran that they should give sadaqah, okay, that they should give sadaqah. I would like, you know, this to be changed, because their proof is the abrogation of giving charity compulsory to the Prophet. Actually, charity is not to the Prophet ﷺ. So the sentence here might be, might put us in a confusion that this charity is compulsory to be given to the Prophet ﷺ, but it is not. They have to give charity, okay, but this is not to the Prophet ﷺ, you know, for their counsel, you know, counseling the Prophet ﷺ in privacy, okay, for their private counseling or conferencing with the Prophet ﷺ. You remember this ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha najaytum rasula, excuse me, alhamdulillah. يهديكم الله ويصلح بالكم أجمعين. So this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نجيتم رسولا فقدموا بين يدي نجواكم صدقة. So this sadaqah was compulsory upon them to be given, okay, if they would like to counsel, to privately, you know, talk to the Prophet ﷺ and take him, you know, in a conference only for their privacy. Then this was abrogated, yet the ayah is still there, okay? And there was nothing to substitute or an alternative to this ayah, and to give it another ayah, for example, cancelling that. But we come to realize that it is cancelled, okay? I hope this is clear. Now, number 2, abrogation with?
Abrogation with a substitute. Abrogation with a substitute cannot be except one of the 3 categories. Number 1, the nasikh, the substitute law, is higher than the mansukh, the abrogated law. Number 2, they are both equal. Number 3, the abrogation is more difficult than the abrogated. There is no difference in the permissibility of the first 2 categories. As for the 3rd category, it is the opinion of the majority of the scholars that it is permissible. Here are some examples. 1, abrogation with an easier substitute than the abrogated law. For example, minkum ishruna sabiruna yaghlibu mi'atayn, which translate, if there are 20 amongst you, patient and persevering, they will vanquish 200, which is abrogated by فَإِن يَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ مِئَةٌ صَابِرَةٌ يَغْلِبُ مِئَتَيْنِ, which translate, if there are 100 of you, patient and persevering, they will vanquish 200. For the compulsion of 1:2 is higher than the compulsion of 1:10.
Yes.
Number 2, I'll continue, Sheikh?
Yeah, continue.
The abrogation by a substitute equivalent to the abrogated. For example, The abrogation of facing Jerusalem for prayers as established in the Sunnah by Allah's statement, فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرُ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ, turn then thy face in the direction of the sacred mosque. For the turning to the Kaaba is just the same as turning towards Jerusalem in terms of action by the one carrying out the obligation. Number 3, abrogation to something more difficult. For example, the abrogation of choice between fasting the month of Ramadan and feeding the poor. By specifying fasting therein, also abrogation of the command of the companions by leaving off fighting and turning away from the idolaters by instituting jihad. So specifying fasting is more difficult than choosing between fasting and feeding the poor, and the obligation of jihad is more difficult than leaving it off.
Yes. It seems clear, alhamdulillah. What he wants to address here is, sometimes that nasikh, comes, with a higher level than the mansukh, okay? Or for example, it becomes more than what was abrogated, or they are at the same level, equal, or it's more difficult. And he mentioned some examples, like the first example when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it, 1 to 10, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it, 1 to 2, which is higher, okay? What you can say, the highness here is due to the numbers, figures. But the more difficult was the first. So it's easier actually, for 1 to face 2 than 1 facing 10, no doubt about it. So it is, I believe it could have been mentioned here easier than the mansukh, not higher. So check this with we can go to the text, the Arabic text, and find out. So can you remind me, Sheikh Abdul Majid?
Okay, Sheikh. Okay,
so I believe it's easier than the mansukh. And
yes,
they should be, they should be more logical and more reasonable. Okay? Because easier goes against difficult. They can equal, both, or difficult and easier. So here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, made facing Kaaba or facing Jerusalem, in what we can say, in essence, they are the same. Okay, whatever you face, okay, facing Jerusalem or facing the Kaaba, in order for facing itself, without mentioning the place, it's just facing for the person. So they are equal, facing here or there, okay? And I remember, someone, he went to the masjid, whom they call Masjid al-Qiblatayn, okay? And he started making 2 rak'ah towards, north, which goes to Jerusalem, okay? And the people started pointing to him, Qibla is not here, Qibla is the other way. After he finished, he did 2 rak'ah there, and they asked him, why you did that? He said, I want to pray to both, Qiblas, which is actually not true, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogated that Qibla, and no one can, after the abrogation, redo that or do it. It won't be accepted, okay? It won't be correct. Let's say, to be more precise, it's incorrect, and if someone did it deliberately, it won't be accepted of him, rather it would be an innovation. But if someone, for example, does it of ignorance, it might be, the deed itself might be accepted, but what he did is a mistake, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most merciful. Now, abrogation of something more difficult is what we mentioned, the expiation in the kafara. Sometimes there is no choice. Fasting precedes, feeding. Okay, fasting is more difficult than feeding. Okay, we can say sometimes, because some people, for example, they can feed. And I remember that one of the ulama of Al-Andalus, the Khalifa asked him, a question, one of the muftis there, and he said that he came, into his, wife during the month of Ramadan, during the day of fasting. So what he should do? Can he, feed 60 poors? Or he said, no, brother, you have to fast 60 days. When he was asked why you did that to him, he said, because he has the money, he has the wealth to do, but I made it difficult on him so that he won't return back again to it, okay? The way, I no doubt this fatwa is not correct, in the most correct opinion, is to give him, the fatwa, but to say to him, what have you done is so horrible, and you should, be afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to do that, and give him the choice, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, stated or mentioned. Okay. Specifying also the jihad, leaving of fighting and turning away from the idolaters, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instituted jihad on them, which is more difficult. So this is clear in those three cases. So either the nasikh, the abrogator, the abrogating law becomes easier, or it might be at the same level, or it might be more difficult, like in this case. These are examples, but there might be more examples in the Sharia. Now, most of the nasikh and mansukh is muhkam now. It is fixed and nobody can change it. It is known from the Sharia. Yes, you can read the abrogation of Quran and Sunnah.
Abrogation of Quran and Sunnah by Quran and Sunnah. Abrogations in this way are of various categories. Number one, abrogation of the Quran by the Quran. There is no difference as to the permissibility of this category. For example, the two verses pertaining to the waiting period for a widow and the two verses pertaining to the one patient and persevering in war, as mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Number two, abrogation of the Sunnah by the Quran. For example, turning to Jerusalem for Salah as established by the Sunnah being abrogated by the verse, فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ, turn your face in the direction of the sacred mosque. Number three, abrogation of the Quran by the Sunnah. This is being divided into two parts. A, abrogation of the Quran by ahad, non-recurrent from the Sunnah. It is the opinion of the majority of scholars that this is not permissible because a qat'i, certain text, cannot be abrogated by a dhanni, uncertain text. B, abrogation of the Quran by mutawatir, which is recurrent hadith from the Sunnah. The saying that prevents this possibility is the opinion of few scholars. Their proof being from the Quran, "Ma nansakh min ayatin aw nunsiha na'ti bi khayrin minha aw mithliha," which translate, none of our revelations do we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better or similar. The point of argument is that the Sunnah is not like the Quran or better than it. The opinion that it is permissible is the opinion of the majority of scholars, as mentioned by Ibn Hajib, and the proof of this opinion is that all is inspiration from Allah, and the abrogation of making a will for parent is abrogated by the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Fala wasiyata liwaris." There is no will for the inheritor. And ijma, consensus, has agreed with the meaning of this hadith. Number 4, abrogation of the sunnah by the sunnah, and this is permissible by consensus among scholars for abrogation of ahad, non-recurrent, and mutawatir, recurrent, by mutawatir, and abrogation of ahad by ahad. There is difference of opinion as to the permissibility of abrogation of mutawatir by ahad. An example of abrogation of sunnah by sunnah is the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Nahaytukum an ziyarat al-quburi fazuruha." I used to prevent you from visiting the graves, so visit them.
Okay, we'll stop here, inshallah. And next week we'll come to more details of these points, because it's a bit involved, and we want to cite upon the issue of ahad and the issue of mutawatir, okay? Because this is one of the, unfortunately, many of the deviant sects, they try to get use of, to go against the well-known ayat, especially with regard to aqidah, with regard to, the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, we need to talk about the qat'i and the dhanni. So I'll give you an assignment this time. I want you to look into ahad, okay? Give us a right definition of it, okay? And what's meaning of qat'i and dhanni and the mutawatir, okay? So this is an assignment. I wish if you can hand it before before Saturday next week, so that we can go over them. Do some research on ahad. Look into, I can give you, inshallah, sources to look into. Inshallah, in the group, I'll put sources. I'll not give you a lot of sources. I'll try to find out if there is something written in English to be a source for you for these definitions of ahad, mutawatir, and qat'i, and dhanni. What's the meaning of it? And so that we can get it, inshallah, established and get our foundation to be clear when we talk about it later, because it will reoccur with us, this terminology. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your attentive listening. If you have questions, you can ask. If there is no question, we'll stop here, inshallah. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your attentive listening. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make what we say of great benefit to us in this world and in the hereafter. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, forgive you, increase your knowledge and faith. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم انا نعوذ برضاك من سخطك وبمعافاتك من عقوبتك وبك منك لا نحصي ثناء عليك انت كما اثنيت على نفسك. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خير.
آمين وإياك.